On an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, a professional opened a distracting app for what felt like the fifth time in a single hour. And the app opened without any resistance at all. That moment is not a failure of willpower. It is a design outcome, because the interface was built to be opened repeatedly, and the focus tool installed to prevent it was only keeping score. There is a category of software that does something genuinely different, creating real friction between the impulse and the action. And the tools in that category are not all the same. So which one actually matches the way you override your own limits? Measurement and blocking are not the same capability, and most people discover that gap at exactly the wrong moment. A dashboard showing how many hours you lost to short-form video does not stop you from opening short-form video tomorrow. The tools that actually interrupt the reflex do it through architecture, locked schedules, system-level controls, and barriers that cost something real to remove. That cost is the point, and understanding what it takes to build a barrier worth keeping is where this gets genuinely useful. Every tool in this video gets measured against the same 5 questions. And those questions come from the same place: your override behavior, not your intentions. The first question is simple. Can you disable this tool in under 60 seconds when the pressure is on? If the answer is yes without any real cost, the tool is a tracker, not a barrier. The second question is whether the friction scales, meaning, does the tool get harder to beat the more you've already failed today? Third, does it follow you across every device you actually use, or does it leave a gap that your distracted brain will find? Fourth, can someone else hold the password so the lock isn't in your own hands? And fifth, the one most people skip, does the tool match the specific moment you lose focus, whether that's a time of day, a mood, or a single app? These 5 questions are the lens for everything that follows, starting with the tools already sitting on your phone right now. Your phone already has a focus system built in, and most people have never pushed it hard enough to find its ceiling. Apple Screen Time lets you schedule downtime, cap app categories, and lock those limits behind a passcode someone else holds. Android Digital Wellbeing runs a similar playbook. Focus Mode silences distracting apps on a timer, and app timers cut access when you hit your daily limit. Both tools are genuinely useful if your override behavior is mild, meaning you sometimes drift, but a soft nudge brings you back. The problem surfaces when the nudge stops working. On both platforms, a determined user can dismiss a limit in seconds, and the passcode lock is only as strong as your willingness to hand that code to someone else. Neither system travels with you. They live on one device, so a blocked phone just redirects you to a laptop. What they do well is establish a baseline. You see the data, you set the intention, and the friction is real enough for occasional slips. The question is whether occasional is the word that honestly describes your relationship with the override button. Most focus tools wait for you to fail, then show you a number. 1 sec does something different. It steps in front of the impulse before the app even opens and asks you to stop for a moment. That interruption is the entire product. And it turns out that's enough to break a surprising number of automatic loops. You can figure a delay, anywhere from a breath to a full minute, and every time you reach for a distracted app, that timer runs first. The question isn't whether you can wait, it's whether the wait makes you reconsider. In testing, a 5-second pause with a breathing prompt is enough for many people to close the app without ever entering it. 1 sec runs on iPhone and works through the iOS Screen Time API, which means it can't block the mobile web independently, and it has no desktop companion. It also won't stop a determined override. If you breathe through the timer and open the app anyway, nothing escalates. So what happens when a pause isn't enough and you need something that actually holds the door shut for a full session? 1 sec slows the impulse down, but it doesn't remove the app from reach. And for a lot of people, that gap is exactly where the override happens. Opal takes a different approach by building your distraction defense around a declared session rather than a single moment of friction. When you start a session in Opal, you're committing to a block that runs for a defined stretch of time, not just a speed bump you tap through. The apps you've flagged as distracting go dark for the duration, and on the strictest setting, there's no pause button waiting for you. That's the structural difference. A session isn't a reminder, it's a container, and the commitment is made at the start, not tested at every minute. Opal runs natively on iOS and Android, which means it lives where most impulsive phone use actually happens. Session model works because it shifts the decision point. You choose discipline once before the craving arrives, instead of fighting it over and over. But what happens when distraction doesn't live on your phone? When your laptop and your tablet are just as loaded with the same apps pulling at your attention? Locking your phone means nothing if your laptop is still open on the same sites. That's the gap Freedom was built to close. Synchronized blocking that fires across your phone, tablet, and computer at the same time. You set a session once, and every supported device goes dark on the same list of sites and apps simultaneously. The question isn't whether you can get through one screen, it's whether you can get through all of them at once. That coordinated pressure is a fundamentally different kind of friction than anything single device. Freedom also runs scheduled sessions, so the block starts before you even sit down and feel the urge to override it. And when you turn on locked mode, you can't pause or cancel a session until the timer runs out. That's not a soft nudge, that's a wall. So ask yourself, how many times have you picked up a second screen the moment your first one went quiet? Freedom is built around the honest answer to that question. But synchronized blocking still depends on the devices you own, and some desktop users need a lock that goes deeper than any session timer can reach. Cold turkey takes a different philosophy from everything we've looked at so far, and that difference lives entirely in the desktop. Where Freedom syncs a block across your phone and laptop together, Cold Turkey plants its flag on Windows and Mac OS and holds that ground with unusual stubbornness. When you activate a locked block, the software removes your ability to edit, pause, or delete it until the timer runs out. You can't click around it in settings, and you can't sweet talk it into an early exit. The only reliable bypass on a locked block is a full operating system reinstall, which is exactly the kind of friction that stops an impulsive override cold. That's not a metaphor for mild inconvenience. It's a genuine structural cost that most people won't pay. So ask yourself honestly, is your distraction problem rooted in the desktop, or does it follow you onto your phone? Cold Turkey answers the desktop question with more conviction than almost any other tool. But it doesn't travel with you, and that gap is either irrelevant or everything, depending on where you actually lose your focus. So which tool actually fits where you are right now, not where you intend to be? If you override soft limits without thinking, you need Cold Turkey or Freedom's locked mode, something that costs you real effort to undo. If your problem is scattered attention across devices, Freedom's cross-device sync closes the gaps your willpower leaves open. If you want to stay inside your existing system without adding new software, Screen Time and Digital Wellbeing give you a starting point, but only if you treat the password as genuinely off-limits. If you're building a sustainable rhythm over weeks, Rescue Times data shows you exactly where the hours are going before you decide what to block. Pick one tool, run it seriously for 7 days, and measure one thing. Did the friction hold when the urge hit hardest. The human operating system exists to help you work with how your mind actually functions, not how you wish it did. Find every resource at humanoperating system.com.